Los Angeles, 2007. In the imposing Los Angeles Times building, investigative reporter Elena Sanchez placed a dusty box she had just received on her desk. The anonymous sender had promised the truth no one dared to publish. 22 years later, the Kiki Camarena case still prompted this kind of mysterious correspondence. Elena opened the box cautiously. Inside, she found dozens of old documents, some marked confidential, and others with sections redacted with black ink. A small cassette recorder lay at the bottom of the box, along with a handwritten note. The voices of the dead still speak. Listen carefully. That same afternoon, as the sun set over Los Angeles, Elena heard for the first time what appeared to be a partial recording of the interrogation of Enrique Kiki Camarena. The quality was poor, with static and distorted voices, but one phrase stood out with disturbing clarity. "You don't understand. It's not just the cartel. There are Americans involved, people who should be on our side." Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. It was the voice of a man dead for more than 2 decades, suggesting a conspiracy far broader than the official version ever admitted. Thus began her journey to unravel the shadows that still surrounded one of the most notorious cases in the history of the drug war, a labyrinth of conspiracies, government collusion, and unanswered questions that stretched from Guadalajara to Washington and beyond. "Another conspiracy nut?" asked Jackson, Elena's editor, skeptically examining the folders spread across his desk. "Maybe," Elena admitted, "but there's something different here. Some of these documents look authentic. Internal DEA memos, partial interrogation transcripts, reports that were never made public. Camarena is old news, Elena. It was solved years ago." "Was it?" She pushed a transcript toward him. "The official version says the Guadalajara cartel kidnapped and killed him because he discovered a marijuana operation at Rancho Buffalo. But these recordings suggest he had uncovered something much bigger, a conspiracy involving American agencies and drug trafficking." Jackson sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Look, don't get me wrong. Camarena was a hero, no doubt. But since his death, dozens of crazy theories have emerged. CIA, KGB, aliens. I'm not talking about aliens, Jackson." Elena pointed to another document. "This is a report from a DEA informant from 1984. It mentions CIA agents meeting regularly with cartel leaders a year before Camarena's kidnapping." That caught Jackson's attention. "Source?" "Anonymous, but I have a plan to verify." Elena smiled. "Felix Rodriguez is still alive. The CIA operative involved with the Contras and supposedly present in Guadalajara during the time in question." Elena gathered the documents. "I'm going to Miami to meet him." Jackson hesitated. "This could be dangerous, you know. If there's anything to these theories, then it's my job to find out." She put the papers back in the folder. "Someone needs to give voice to the questions that were never answered." 2 days later, Elena was going through recently declassified DEA files related to Operation Leyenda, the massive investigation launched after Camarena's murder. Most of the documents contained information already known, but one memo in particular caught her attention. To Director, name redacted, from Special Agent James Martinez. Subject: "Inconsistencies in the Camarena case, sir. During the investigation, we have identified troubling discrepancies that suggest external interference. Informant Rambo claims that agents from Redacted were present during Camarena's interrogation. Additionally, the disappearance of evidence from the crime scene, including the cassette tape mentioned in the autopsy report, suggests a professional cleaning operation. I respectfully request authorization to investigate possible connections to Redacted operations in Central America." On the back of the memo, stamped in red, "Denied national security." Elena carefully photographed the document. The reference, to a cassette tape mentioned in the autopsy report was new to her. Could it be the same recording she had received? As she left the National Archives, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. She could swear the same car had been there when she arrived 3 hours earlier. Coincidence, probably. But still, she memorized the license plate. The Cuban cafe in Little Havana was crowded when Elena arrived for her meeting with Felix Rodriguez. The former CIA operative, now in his 70s, still maintained a military posture as he waited for her. At a back table, Miss Sanchez. He didn't stand when she approached. "You told me on the phone this is about Kiki Camarena." "Yes." Elena sat down, placing her recorder on the table. "Do you mind?" Rodriguez shrugged. "I have nothing to hide. I've spoken about this before." Elena turned on the recorder. "According to our records, you were in Guadalajara at the time of Camarena's kidnapping." "That is incorrect." Rodriguez took a sip of coffee. "I was in Costa Rica, working on supporting the Nicaraguan Contras. It's all public. So you never met Rafael Caro Quintero or Ernesto Fonseca, the cartel leaders responsible for Camarena's death?" A slight hesitation. "Not personally, no." Elena placed a photograph on the table, taken from the documents she had received. It showed Rodriguez shaking hands with a man who looked very much like Quintero. "This is a forgery." Rodriguez pushed the photo back. "Or a similar-looking person. I never met that man." "What about the allegations that the CIA was aware of drug trafficking operations funding the Contras? That there was a tacit agreement to allow certain routes in exchange for support for operations in Nicaragua?" Rodriguez's face hardened. "Those are conspiracy theories. The CIA never sanctioned drug trafficking, but you were aware it was happening." "Look, miss, let me explain how the real world works." Rodriguez leaned forward. "In conflict zones, you work with the allies available, not the ideal ones. Some of the Contras may have been involved with drugs. That doesn't mean the agency approved or participated. What about the claim that Camarena discovered an operation linking drug trafficking to Contra funding, and that's why he was silenced?" Rodriguez turned off the recorder. "This interview is over. Kiki Camarena was killed by the Guadalajara cartel because he exposed their marijuana operation. Period. Anything beyond that is fiction, created by people with political agendas." He stood to leave, but paused. "A piece of advice, miss. Some stories are better left alone, for your own safety." As he left, Elena turned the recorder back on and spoke. Rodriguez vehemently denied any connection, but his body language suggested discomfort when confronted with the photograph. Interestingly, he didn't ask where I got it from. The city had changed dramatically since 1985. Modern skyscrapers now dotted the skyline, and gleaming shopping malls had replaced many of the old landmarks. But for Elena, walking the streets where Kiki Camarena spent his last days, the ghost of the past seemed almost palpable. Her local contact, a Mexican journalist named Javier Valdez, met her at a cafe near the former location of the American consulate. "It's dangerous to dig into this case, you know," said Javier after they sat down, "even after all this time." "Why?" "The main perpetrators are dead or in prison, not all of them." Javier lowered his voice. "And the corruption that allowed it to happen, that never really disappeared, just changed form." Elena showed Javier some of the photos she had brought. "Do you recognize any of these men? They appear in photos with Quintero, but I couldn't identify them." Javier studied the images. "This is Manuel Ibarra, former head of the DFS, already deceased. This one," he pointed to another man, "looks like Salvador Escobar. He was a big shot in the state police, retired rich, lives in Cancun now." "And this one?" Elena pointed. To a tall, European-looking man, Javier frowned. "I'm not sure, but he looks like an American who frequented diplomatic circles back then. We called him El Rubio, the blonde one. Would you know anyone from back then who's still around? Someone who was close to the case? Javier hesitated. There's an ex-cop, Jorge Godoy. He was on the force when Camarena was kidnapped. Wasn't directly involved in the case, but knew many people who were. He's retired now. Can you introduce me to him? I can try, but don't expect much. People like Godoy learned long ago to keep their mouths shut. As they left the cafe, Elena noticed two men in a parked car watching them. When she looked directly at them, they started the engine and drove away. "Friends of yours?" asked Javier, who had also noticed. "No," Elena replied. "But it seems I'm asking the right questions." Jorge Godoy lived in a modest house on the outskirts of the city. A man in his early 70s with white hair and calloused hands, he looked more like a gentle grandfather than an ex-cop who had worked during the bloodiest years of the cartel's rise. "I don't know what you expect to find after so many years," he said, serving coffee to Elena and Javier on his back porch. "The Camarena story has been told dozens of times." "But never completely," Elena replied. "There are still missing pieces." She played a segment of the recording she had received, where Camarena's weakened voice mentioned Americans being involved. Godoy listened with an impassive expression, but his hands trembled slightly. "Where did you get that?" he asked when the audio ended. "An anonymous source. Is it authentic?" Godoy stared at the horizon before answering. "There were rumors about recordings of the interrogations. Supposedly, Quintero recorded everything to prove to his superiors that he had extracted valuable information." "Superiors? You mean other cartel bosses?" "Among others." Godoy took a long sip of coffee. "Look, you have to understand how things worked back then. The lines between the government, the police, and the cartels were blurred. And the American involvement that Camarena mentions?" Godoy's eyes narrowed. "What do you know about Operation Iran-Contra? The scandal where the Reagan administration secretly sold arms to Iran and used the money to fund the Contra rebels in Nicaragua?" Elena replied. "That's the official version, yes. But there was more. Much more." Godoy lowered his voice. "There were rumors that the CIA was allowing the cartels to transport cocaine into the U.S. on planes returning after delivering arms to the Contras. And Camarena discovered this?" "I don't know for certain, but weeks before his kidnapping, he was investigating strange flights from a remote airstrip. Flights that didn't appear in official records." Elena felt her heart race. "Do you have any proof of this?" Godoy smiled sadly. "If I did, do you think I'd be alive today?" "But—" he hesitated. "There was a pilot, an American who flew for the cartel, nicknamed El Gavilan, the Hawk. He knew all the secret routes, all the arrangements. Is he still alive? I don't know. He disappeared after the case blew up. Some say he went back to the United States with a new identity. Others say he's at the bottom of a ravine somewhere." When Elena and Javier were leaving, Godoy held her arm. "Be careful with this story. It's already cost many lives. There are powerful people who prefer certain questions to remain unanswered." Back in the United States, Elena followed a lead on the mysterious pilot mentioned by Godoy. Through contacts in the DEA veterans community, she got a name: Richard Davis, ex-CIA pilot now living quietly in the suburbs of San Diego. Elena observed him for several days, studying his routine. He seemed like an ordinary elderly man. Walked a dog, bought groceries, frequented a local cafe every morning. Nothing indicated his alleged dark past. Finally, she approached him at the cafe, sitting at his table without invitation. "Mr. Davis? Or do you prefer El Gavilan?" The white-haired man froze, his coffee halfway to his mouth. After a moment, he carefully placed the cup on the table. "I don't know what you're talking about, miss. I'm investigating the Camarena case, specifically the parts that never made it into the official records." Eleanor kept her voice low. Like the flights carrying arms to the Contras and returning with cocaine. Flights that you piloted. Davis looked around nervously. You're confusing me with someone else. I have photos, Mr. Davis, of you, younger, standing next to Felix Rodriguez and Rafael Caro Quintero. A lie, but Elena watched his reaction carefully. The man's face paled. What do you want? The truth. About what Camarena discovered and why he was really killed. Davis grabbed his cane and started to stand. I can't help you. I already spoke with Jorge Godoy in Guadalajara, Eleanor continued. He mentioned the tapes, complete recordings of Camarena's interrogation. That made him stop. Godoy should keep his mouth shut. So the tapes exist. Davis sat back down, looking older and more tired. Look, some things are better left in the past, for everyone's good. Kiki Camarena deserves justice. Justice. Davis laughed bitterly. You have no idea what you're digging into, no idea how big this is. Then tell me. Davis was silent for a long moment, apparently debating with himself. Finally, he sighed. Not here. Meet me tonight, Pickles Pier at 9. He scribbled something on a napkin. This is my number. If I don't answer when you call, don't show up. It means it's not safe. He stood up and limped away, leaving Eleanor with more questions than answers, and a growing sense that she was approaching something much bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. The ocean wind was cutting as Eleanor waited on the deserted pier. It was 9:20 and there was no sign of Davis. She had called the number he provided, and he had answered with a single word, come. In the distance, she saw a solitary figure at the end of the pier, looking out at the ocean. Approaching cautiously, she recognized Davis, standing alone against the dark horizon. I thought you had given up, he said, without turning around. I considered it. Seems like a perfect setting to dispose of a nosy journalist. Davis gave a short laugh. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't need to bring you to the ocean. There are simpler methods. That's not very reassuring. Finally, he turned to face her. You want to know about Camarena? The real story? Yes. And what will you do with this information? Publish it. The public has a right to know. Davis shook his head. So idealistic. Reminds me of him in a way. He took a small object from his pocket, a flash drive. I've had this for decades. Digitized the original tapes years ago. Kept it as life insurance, you might say. The recordings of Camarena's interrogation. Some of them. The parts that nobody wanted heard. He held the flash drive but didn't hand it over yet. Before I give you this, you need to understand what really happened. Davis took a deep breath and began his story. In 1984, I was flying for the CIA, officially delivering supplies to the Contras. Unofficially, there were other shipments. At first, I didn't ask questions. Classified mission, need to know, all that talk. But then I started noticing that on return trips, there were cargoes that weren't on the manifests. Packages that were delivered to private airstrips in Mexico, then the US. Drugs, Elena suggested. Davis nodded. Mostly cocaine. A deal had been made. The Mexican and Colombian cartels would help fund the Contras in exchange for, let's call it, selective immunity. Certain shipments wouldn't be intercepted. And the CIA knew? Certain elements within the agency, yes. It was compartmentalized. Most agents had no idea. Those who found out either got sudden transfers to distant posts or learned to look the other way. He paused. But Camarena was different. He followed the money trail, connected the dots. What exactly did he discover? An operation at Rancho Buffalo. It wasn't just a marijuana field. It was a logistics center. Planes landed there with arms for the Contras, took off with drugs. And everyone was involved. The cartel, elements of the CIA, high-ranking Mexican officials. And that's what got him killed? Davis looked away. Not exactly. See, Camarena compiled a file, evidence, photos, documents. But he made a mistake. He trusted the wrong people. Someone on the American side betrayed him, told the cartel exactly what he knew and where to find him. You're saying it was the American government itself that handed him over, not the whole government, just some powerful people who couldn't allow the truth to come out. Davis finally handed over the flash drive. The recordings are here. There's a part where Camarena, even under torture, names names. People in Washington. Elena took the flash drive, feeling its weight, not just physical, but historical. Why are you giving me this now, after all these years? Davis looked at the ocean. Again, I'm dying cancer 6 months, maybe less. I've spent decades carrying this, and I don't want to take it to the grave. Should I worry about my safety? Honestly, yes. But many of the main players are dead. Others are too old to care, and the world has changed. Maybe it's time for the truth. When Elena was about to ask another question, Davis abruptly raised his hand, silencing her. There's someone on the pier, he whispered. Elena looked back and saw a figure walking toward them, still distant but approaching quickly. Go, Davis urged. Take the flash drive and publish everything. It's the best protection you can have. Come with me, Elena insisted. We can protect you, get your testimony formally. Too late for me. He smiled sadly. I did my part in the dirt. Now I'm trying to do at least one right thing before the end. Elena hesitated, but the figure was approaching. She shook Davis's, and one last time, and quickly departed in the opposite direction, the flash drive secure in her pocket. When she reached the parking lot, she looked back. Davis and the stranger were talking. It didn't seem hostile, but something in the body language made her uneasy. She drove back to her hotel, constantly checking the rear-view mirror, with the sensation that she had just crossed a point of no return. With trembling hands, Elena connected the flash drive to her laptop. Inside, there were several audio files and some scanned documents. She clicked on the first audio file. The recording was of surprisingly good quality, considering its age. It started in the middle of an interrogation. Camarena's weak voice was recognizable, answering questions in a mixture of English and Spanish. Already told you everything I know about Buffalo. Camarena's voice, exhausted. Who else knows about the deliveries? Asked an interrogator. I don't know what you're talking about. Sounds of impact followed by groans of pain. The planes, pendejo. The Americans. Who else knows about them? Henderson. He knows. Who is Henderson? Thomas Henderson. State. Camarena's voice faltered. Is he CIA? DEA? State embassy, but works for another department. Elena paused the recording, her heart pounding. Thomas Henderson, the same name that had appeared in the documents she received in the mysterious box. She continued listening. As the interrogation progressed, Camarena, even in his debilitated state, mentioned other names, Mexican officials, but also Americans. He talked about documents he had gathered, evidence about flights transporting arms and drugs, bank accounts. In Panama and the Cayman Islands, at one particularly disturbing moment, a new voice entered the recording. An American speaking Spanish with a heavy accent. Agent Camarena, this is truly regrettable. You should have stayed away from the planes issue. Camarena's voice showed shock, even through the pain. You're American. Why? Some operations are more important than individuals, Agent. I hope you understand that. Eleanor listened to the rest of the recording in a state of shock. There was clear evidence that at least one American, possibly an intelligence officer, was present during Camarena's interrogation. The documents on the flash drive offered additional context. There were flight records, lists of bank account numbers, and one particularly incriminating document, a memorandum apparently from the CIA discussing the need to contain potential leaks related to transport operations in Central America. While processing this information, the hotel phone rang, startling her. Hello, Elena. It was Davis's voice, tense. They know we met. You need to get out of there now. Who knows? Who was on the pier? No time to explain. Grab your things and leave through the back exit. Don't use your credit card. Don't use your phone. But now, Elena, they're coming. The line went dead. Elena looked out the hotel window and saw a black sedan parking at the entrance, the same type of car she had noticed in Washington. With her heart racing, she quickly packed her laptop, the flash drive, and her most important documents in her backpack. Leaving everything else behind, she exited through the back of the hotel, exactly as Davis had instructed. Outside, she called the one person she trusted completely. "Jackson, I need your help." "Let me get this straight," said Jackson, pacing back and forth in the small living room of the newspaper's safe apartment. "You're saying agents of the American government may have been involved in the kidnapping and murder of a DEA agent?" "Not just involved," Elena replied, pointing to her laptop screen where the files from the flash drive were open. "Potentially present during his interrogation and torture, and certainly involved in covering up the real reason he was targeted." Jackson ran his hand over his face. "This is explosive doesn't begin to describe it. We need to publish, Jackson, with all the documents, all the recordings." "It's not that simple." Jackson sat down heavily. "Accusations like these require corroboration. We need to confirm the authenticity of the recordings, verify the documents. And while we verify, the people who are following me can make the recordings disappear. Or me. You think you're in real danger?" In response, Elena showed the photos she had discreetly taken of the men. In the black sedan. Same car in Washington, Guadalajara, and San Diego. Same men. That's not coincidence. Jackson studied the photos, his expression grave. "Okay, here's what we'll do. I'll put our fact-checkers on this immediately. If we can confirm authenticity, we publish. Meanwhile, you stay here. Don't go out. Don't contact anyone. What about Davis? If he's involved in what he says he is, he knows how to take care of himself." Jackson stood up. "I'll take a copy of all this as insurance." After Jackson left, Eleanor sat with her documents, trying to organize everything into a coherent narrative. The more she examined the evidence, the more terrifying the conspiracy seemed. If her findings were correct, Camarena's death was not simply a cartel silencing an agent who discovered their marijuana field. It was a sanctioned killing, or at least tolerated, by elements within the American government itself, to protect a secret operation that used drug trafficking to finance an unauthorized war. That would explain why, despite the massive operation, Leyenda and its unprecedented resources, certain lines of investigation were abruptly terminated, why certain testimonies were ignored, why certain evidence disappeared. As she worked, Elena listened to the recordings again. This time she paid particular attention to the voice of the American. There was something familiar about it, something she couldn't quite place. Her phone rang, a prepaid phone Jackson had given her, whose number only he knew. "Elena, it's Jackson. We have the preliminary analysis of the recordings. And our audio expert confirms the recordings appear authentic, detected no signs of digital manipulation, and the voice identified as Camarena's matches known samples of his voice from official recordings." Elena felt a wave of relief. "So we can publish?" "Almost. There's something else you need to see. I'm sending it to your email now." Elena opened her laptop and found Jackson's message. It contained a single photo, apparently taken at an official event in the mid-80s. It showed a group of men in formal attire. One of them was circled in red. "Who is that?" she asked. "Thomas Henderson, the man Camarena mentions in the recording. And here's the scary part. He wasn't just a low-level staffer. At the time of Camarena's murder, he was the CIA's deputy director of operations for Latin America." Elena felt her stomach sink. "That puts the conspiracy at the highest possible level." "Exactly. And there's more. Henderson didn't die in a boating accident in 1995, as his official obituary says. Our people found records of him living under a new name in Virginia until at least 2003. Is he still alive? We don't know. But if he is, he's the key to this whole story. Jackson paused. Elena, the editor-in-chief wants us back tomorrow to finalize the story. Sunday front page. I'll be there. When she hung up, Elena returned to the recordings, now with a new objective, trying to identify the voice of the American present at the interrogation. Could it be Henderson? She didn't have a sample of his voice to compare, but the idea that the CIA's Deputy Director of Operations for Latin America might have been present during the torture of an American federal agent was almost inconceivable. And yet, all the evidence pointed to exactly that. A sudden noise in the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps? She turned off all the lights and moved silently away from the windows. The footsteps approached, stopped in front of her door. Then the distinct sound of a key being inserted in the lock. Eleanor grabbed her laptop and the flash drive, frantically looking for a place to hide. There was no back exit. The door opened. Slowly, and a figure entered. Elena? The voice was familiar. Davis? She emerged from her hiding place. How did you find me? I followed Jackson from your hotel. He closed the door behind him. We don't have much time. They're looking for you. Who exactly are they? Ex-agents, mostly. Contractors. People who still protect the secrets of the old operations. He looked exhausted, older than just a day. A goo. Did you listen to the recordings? Yes. And we identified Henderson. He was Deputy Director for Latin America. I know. Davis sat down heavily. He was the one who organized the whole scheme. The drug routes, the deals with the cartels, the political protection. A patriot in his own twisted way. Believed that defeating the communists in Central America justified anything. Even abandoning an American federal agent to be tortured and killed. Davis looked at the floor. Especially that. Camarena was going to talk to the press. Had documents? Evidence. Henderson couldn't allow that. Were you there? Eleanor asked softly. During the interrogation. A long silence. Not during. After. His voice was almost a whisper. I was sent to clean up. Make sure certain evidence was never found. And the tapes? How did you get them? One of the Mexican interrogators was recording everything as insurance. When things went south, he sold me the tapes. He had made copies, of course. In this business, everyone protects themselves. Why are you helping me now? Davis looked up, his eyes full of something that looked like redemption. Because I've spent decades having nightmares about Camarena's face. Because I'm dying and want to do at least one right thing. He checked his watch. We need to go. It's not safe here. Where to? I have a place. Henderson is alive, Elena, and he's agreed to talk to you. The house was surprisingly modest, a small ranch on an isolated lot overlooking the Pacific. Davis drove in silence, repeatedly checking the rearview mirror to ensure they weren't being followed. Why would Henderson agree to talk to me? Elena asked as they approached. Because he's dying too, cancer, like me, and because he wants to control the narrative. Even now he still thinks like a spy. If the story is going to come out better, it'd be on his terms. Davis parked and turned off the engine. One thing before we go in, don't expect remorse. In his mind, he never betrayed his country. Quite the opposite. The front door opened before they reached the porch. An elderly man appeared, tall, thin to the point of frailty, but still with penetrating eyes that seemed to instantly assess. Elena, Miss Sanchez, he said, his voice surprisingly strong. Finally we meet. Mr. Henderson, please come in. We don't have much time. The interior of the house was Spartan, with few personal touches. Some photographs on the walls showed a younger Henderson in various countries, always in formal attire, always with politicians or military figures. He led them to a simple living room and gestured for them to sit. Davis says you have the tapes. Henderson began without preamble. I do, and they've already been authenticated. Henderson nodded, apparently not surprised. And you plan to publish tomorrow. Front page, I see. He studied her for a moment. What do you hope to accomplish with this? Justice for Camarena? The main perpetrators are dead or in prison. Not. All of them, Elena replied, looking directly at him. You're sitting right in front of me. Henderson smiled slightly. Touché. But do you really think, on the brink of death, I care about public accusations or exposure? I agreed to speak with you for one reason only, so that you understand the context. What context could justify sacrificing an American federal agent? Henderson sighed. Isn't the Cold War ancient history to you, Miss Sanchez? A time when the world was divided into two camps, and the threat of nuclear annihilation was real. Congress had cut funding for the Contras. But if Nicaragua fell completely under Soviet influence, all of Central America could follow. We needed funds, resources. So, you made a pact with drug traffickers. We made pragmatic arrangements with forces already operating in the region. The flow of drugs into the United States existed before, would exist after. At least this way it served a higher purpose. And Camarena? Henderson's expression hardened. An unfortunate collateral effect. He was a good agent, dedicated. But he was about to expose an operation that protected national security. So you handed him over to the cartel. Not directly. I simply didn't interfere when we learned the cartel had identified him as a threat. Henderson paused. And yes, I sent people to ensure certain evidence was never found. Were you there during the interrogation? Is that your voice on the recording? Henderson met her gaze steadily. Yes, the simple admission caught Elena off. A guard. She had expected denials, equivocations, not a direct confession. Why be present? To assess what he had told others. To determine the extent of potential exposure. You could have saved him. At the cost of the operation? Of our position in Central America. Sometimes, Miss Sanchez, leaders need to make impossible decisions for a greater good. Elena felt nausea rising. This wasn't a leadership decision. It was murder. Henderson shrugged. Call it what you will. History will judge whether we were right or wrong. He rose with some difficulty. Our conversation is over. You have what you came for, your confirmation. As Elena and Davis stood to leave, Henderson added, One last thing. Publish your story if you want. But know that there are still powerful people who would prefer this story remain buried. I may be dying with no fear of consequences, but you still have a life ahead of you. Or not, depending on your choices. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. After you leave, I'll make some calls. There are people who need to prepare for the fallout from your report. He looked at Davis.